We've gotten immigration messed up for 45 years. We're doing it at a time that America's celebrating a huge anniversary. We're going to celebrate that forever. And so this show's always going to be talking about the beauty of America and the future of America.
Welcome to the new Kevin Roberts Show. And if you're a viewer or listener of our program in the past, you probably noticed a couple of changes. For instance, I'm not Kevin Roberts. See, this isn't just your typical podcast about policy. No, it's actually about a conversation about what this country is all about and what our values have always been and what need to be if we're going to succeed. And so we've mixed things up a bit. It's Dr. Kevin Roberts and me, Larry O'Connor. And Dr. Roberts, thanks for including me in this little conversation every week.
You know, we're going to have some fun with this new format, Larry, and thanks for being part of it. But when my colleagues told me that Larry O'Connor, who, all kidding aside, is my favorite radio host, you know, that I listen to your show coming in each morning.
Your radio dial's broken, isn't it?
It
You
is.
can't change
It's
the
just
channel.
set to
No,
that
I appreciate
one. That you were not only available to do this, but willing to do it, because I didn't want this just to be a lecture, even though we had a lot of great guests, that you would be someone who would also push me to be precise or more precise about some of the topics we want to cover. So thank you.
Well, I don't plan on cross-examining you, but I do.
Oh, good.
As a consumer of podcast conversation content, I like it when the interviewer really pushes the person and sort of challenges some of the premises that you put forth. So I'm not going to, Perry Mason you, but I'm hoping to actually get more out of these ideas, because I think I'm asking questions that the listener might be asking.
And that's the feedback we got about the show, which is that the content's good. We would love to be able to ask some questions. We would love to go a little bit deeper into some of these questions. And as we're reprising this show, Larry, we're doing it at a time that America's celebrating a huge anniversary. We're going to celebrate that forever. And so this show's always going to be talking about the beauty of America and the future of America.
Well, that's a good thing, because our very first episode, our first topic today is about the American dream, the golden age, some people are calling it these days. You want to jump right into it?
Absolutely.
Let's go. Well, let's start with the idea of the premise. What is the American dream? Because I hear a lot of different people say a lot of different things about what the American dream is. Some people make it sound almost like a socialist dream. What is the American dream?
Yes, the American dream is not what a certain candidate for mayor in New York City defines it to be. Rather, it is that every American gets the equal opportunity to flourish. They might define flourishing as economic, as social, as cultural, as religious, something else. The point is that in the United States, we don't guarantee equal outcome, but we do guarantee equal opportunity. And that means that we have to have this perfect combination of the government doing a little bit of what the government's supposed to do, mostly staying out of our way, but it also means that we as individuals have to take on a lot of responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, the consequences of our behavior. And economically, if you start a business and it's a bad idea and it fails, we don't bail you out. That's on you. But guess what? It's America. You get to pull yourself back up and start all over.
Oh, all right. Now, let's say I'm 28 years old. I got my bachelor degree from a liberal arts college, and I was told, you get your college degree, you'll get a great job, and everything's just going to be smooth sailing. But that's not the case. I can't afford a down payment for a home. I'm still living in my parents' basement. Things are not affordable for me anymore. I hear you talk about pulling myself up. I hear about, American equal opportunity. That doesn't buy me lunch. It doesn't help me get through the next day.
Well, I'm a Generation Xer who's not going to excoriate the 28-year-old saying that, and I'll tell you why. The last couple of generations of policymakers in this country have done a pretty good job of messing things up. And in some cases, it is making the government to be too intrusive into individual economic decisions. In other cases, economically, it's choosing winners and losers. The proverbial concern that I and we at Heritage have about crony corporate capitalist welfare. But ultimately, it also means we've had a demise or deterioration of our institutions, Larry. And so it isn't just that the government has had bad policy. To be really candid, it means that individuals and families have made some really poor decisions along the way. Mm-hmm. And so that all leads to this point, which is not to be overly pessimistic or negative, obviously. It's to say we all have a lot to fix from our own individual decisions about where we go to school, why we go to school, how long we study, and how expensive it is, to those of us who are in policymaking directly or indirectly, using this opportunity, this political moment, if you will, to take advantage of this narrow window that we have to correct all of these problems. And so to that 28-year-old, I would say, from this middle-aged conservative, we have to start addressing real problems. For example, I'll just leave you with this comment. I think the 2028 presidential election is going to be won or lost based on which side better explains the solution to the housing crisis, which is what the proverbial 28-year-old American, wherever they're living, is feeling.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because we keep hearing this buzzword, affordability. That's what we need to focus on.
It's a great Marxist word.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like the solution to affordability looks an awful lot like Marxism. What is your solution? What is our solution and the conservative solution for the affordability crisis? Because it sounds like their idea is the government will take care of all of that. And I don't think history proves out that makes things more affordable.
That's exactly right. In fact, the government does have a very important role in step number one, and that's to get itself out of so much of this.
Would you argue that the reason why things are not affordable right now and we're having this crisis is because it was too much government intrusion and manipulation of the markets in the first place?
That's 80% of the problem.
Yeah.
All the way from home building, which I'll touch on here in a minute, to permitting, to mortgage lending, all of that. Government is way too involved. But the comment on house building that I'll mention is I was in Alaska recently fishing. I caught a lot of fish, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
But we were in the national forest that generates a lot of the housing timber. They can't mill that timber anymore because of government regulation. In fact, as we were leaving this little town in southern Alaska, our tour guide said that sawmill is in its last few weeks of lumber that it can actually mill because the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, even under the first 6 or 7 months of Trump's second term, have not done what they need to do to release more of that timber. Now, it goes without saying, but I'll say it, there is ample lumber there.
Yeah.
There are many, many trees. That's one little sliver of the problem that is an example of the government being too involved. But let's also keep in mind that adding to this housing crisis is that education is too expensive, healthcare is too expensive. This is the moment we have to fix it and restore the possibility of living the American dream.
So you're talking about the lumber industry as a great example in Alaska, Pacific Northwest. If you look historically at America, that was a huge part of the design concept of this nation. We own the lumber industry. We're all about this American entrepreneurism and idealism to go out there and we've got trees, we'll chop them down, we'll build houses. What is the historical origins of the idea of the American dream in the first place? Because it looks like we've gotten lost somewhere along the way.
Well, the phrase was coined about 100 years ago in the 1930s by a social observer, and he did a really good job, I think, of explaining that the American dream isn't just about economics. It isn't just about, say, personal security or sort of physical safety, which we understand in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It isn't just about the opportunity to get the best education in the history of the world. It really is putting all of those things together so that we can be self-governing. You know, that's a phrase that we like to use a lot at Heritage because it really does sum up what the American dream is, which is to say that you wake up one morning, this would be the ideal, you wake up one morning and you really are free to set about your own path. And that means you're going to have to work hard. It means that government is going to do its job, and its job actually is to ensure the availability of your rights. It doesn't give you those rights,
right,
but it protects those rights on your behalf.
And protects other people from intruding on those rights.
That's the precise way that it protects you. Obviously protects you from foreign invasion and all those things. But the great thing about the phrase American dream, even though the two words have been coined together for just 100 years, is that they really do explain those two words, the founding of this country. The 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence basically were signing on to what you and I and the audience would understand as the American dream. Now, they had an extraordinarily eloquent, beautifully grounded argument about how the King of England was violating that. What was the King of England violating? He was violating what we know to be ordered liberty, this perfect combination of an orderly society, which is appealing to those of us who are middle-aged, and to the younger versions of Larry and Kevin, a society that also honors liberty.
Yeah.
The uniqueness of the United States, more than anything else, more than its pluralism, more than this concept of the American dream, is that our political project is to put into perfect balance order and liberty. The American dream cannot be lived if those two things are not in balance, both for us as individuals, but also writ large for society as a whole.
So in other words, there's a reason why the Declaration of Independence said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They weren't guaranteeing happiness, but they're protecting your right to pursue happiness.
That's exactly right.
It's almost like standing on a mountaintop at sunrise and you see the opportunity of a brand new day, the rebirth of a day, and the world is your oyster. I should be able to do it, and I don't need the government to get in my way of doing it.
That's exactly right. And if I may geek out for just a minute or two.
Please. It's what we like about you, Dr. Robert.
Are you sure? The audience will know, you know this, that the pursuit of happiness as a phrase replaced another phrase, private property. And there are some people, well-intentioned, who misinterpret that original draft by Thomas Jefferson as being overly influenced by John Locke, which is to say that everything is won or lost by private property. To be sure, it's really important, don't get me wrong. But what Jefferson meant when he put the phrase private property in, and the reason pursuit of happiness was an even more precise way to convey it, was that if you own your private property, you're living what you and I would call the American dream. Not just the economic benefits that may come from owning private property, but from the security of it. And by security of it, not just material, like the mental security.
Yeah.
That this is yours. You literally own part of this republic, which is why the housing issue in the 2020s is so important that we get fixed.
Well, and we've seen other countries experiment with fixing those problems by having the government take ownership of private property and industry. And, well, it's the opposite of the American dream, ultimately. So you keep referring to the younger Kevin and the younger Larry. I'm fascinated to hear about this little kid, Kevin, growing up. You didn't come out of the womb with all of these ideas.
I don't think so.
When you were young, what was it that made you sort of envision the American dream? What was your American dream when you were a kid?
Well, my grandparents who helped raise me were both Marine veterans, including my grandmother, obviously. She was 4'11", 95 pounds, served in the Marines. She and my grandfather met in the engine well of a fighter plane.
Oh, really?
At the naval base in California. He was a great mechanic. She was small enough to install the radar equipment. And they met in the engine well. He asked her out on the first date.
Super romantic.
And so these are people who moved back to Louisiana, and where I grew up, and were huge, huge Reagan fans. At the time, neither was a registered Republican, because you really couldn't be in Louisiana. Actually, you literally couldn't be when they moved back to Louisiana in the late 1940s. It was illegal.
Oh.
There was the quote unquote primary election in Louisiana in the 40s, 50s, 60s until the early 70s was basically just the Democratic nomination. But all of that to say, I was little, 5, 6, 7 years old, listening to Reagan's weekly radio address before he was president. And so he becomes president. He restores order, I would say, does a lot to maintain ordered liberty. But for me, the real coming of age moment about the American dream was, in spite of all of the boom and bust cycle of Southern Louisiana, some tragedies that happened in my life with family members I wrote about in a recent book, that in 1992 as a high school senior, I found myself helping to organize what ended up being Pat Buchanan's largest campaign rally.
Oh, wow.
In the whole country in 1992. And the speech that he gave there was perfect for that audience. A very patriotic audience, a very religious, particularly Roman Catholic audience, an audience that had really taken it on the chin economically because of the boom and bust cycle of the oil industry. And yet, guess what? Every single one of us believed that because it was America, that we were going to flourish once again. And so Pat Buchanan, reading reality truthfully, as I like to say, wasn't a way of him saying the American dream is dead. Quite the opposite. He was saying we have to acknowledge the problems, the obstacles to it, so that we can live it again. And ever since then, I've thought, regardless of whatever the obstacles are for me or another American, get over yourself and remember that we get to wake up and call ourselves Americans. It's the greatest blessing any group of people has ever had in the history of the world.
See, young Kevin was way wonkier than young Larry.
Yeah, my older sister said, she still says, you've always been such a nerd.
But see, my American dream moment was when I got my first car. And when I sat behind the wheel of the car, I realized, wait a minute, I can just go wherever I want. No one can tell me I can't drive there. I could drive to Vegas right now if I wanted to. I can do that.
It'd be a bad idea. But
It was freedom. Yeah, no, bad things happen there, but that's what freedom felt like. And I realized, and it occurs to me, the political left in America, they're really big on mass transit, on subways and trains and buses and light rail, because the thing about that is you get on the train, you got to go where they tell you to go. You got to stay on their route. You've got to go and stop, and you only stop where the government has designed to stop to be. But if you're behind the wheel of a car, you can go wherever you want as long as there's a road, sometimes even when there aren't any roads. So we're sort of the ideology of the muscle car, and they're the ideology of light rail.
That's right. This is why I hate the whole concept of self-driving cars. And so some of my friends and colleagues say, well, given how much you commute and drive and so on, wouldn't it, be a great convenience in your life? I said, yes, up until the point the government says you may not go here or there, or you must go here or there.
Yeah.
And let's remember, one need not be a conspiracy theorist to remember that the government broached that concept during COVID.
Very recently, yes, they did. And it was all, by the way, under the guise of protecting our safety, protecting us. They had to be there to protect us. It's interesting when people get sworn in to work for government or the military or elected office, they swear to protect and defend the Constitution, not protect and defend the individuals, right? The Constitution's there, they protect that, and then we get our freedoms and our liberties. That's all part of this American dream conversation.
It is. We just simply could not pursue the American dream, however each of us defines it, without the order, the rule of law, if you prefer, that comes from the Constitution. And by that, I mean not just the sheet of paper, but the couple thousand years of custom that helped produce that, from Rome to Jerusalem to Athens to London to Philadelphia. The reason the radical left wants to erase the Constitution, they would, I think, rip it in half, but also rip in half our history and our custom, is because it is a check against totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And obviously, you can't have the American dream with that.
And whenever they infringe on our rights, it's always under that guise. It's for your own good. It's to protect you. I can't wait. The future episodes we're going to have here where we dive into the historical roots of our values and our principles and where they came from. I can't wait. But we should talk about where we're headed right now. President Trump and Vice President Vance keep talking about the golden age. I think it's their way of articulating the American dream. What do we now and over the course of the next several decades need to focus on most to make sure that we ensure that dream and ensure that golden age?
Three big themes, and they're really big, so I'll be a little specific with each of them too, strike me as what we need to be talking about. And I think most Americans will agree with this. First and foremost, Americans are yearning for security. They want security in their neighborhoods. They want security if they're in a city or in a suburb or in a rural area, which has been wrecked by all kinds of drug abuse. They want national security, but a national security that, while very lethal when it needs to be, is also more humble. And it also means it's less expensive, because they're also looking for economic security. Mm-hmm. And the government over the last 40 or 50 years under both Republican and Democrat regimes has, of course, really attacked that economic security. But they're also looking for stability. And by that, I mean they're looking for stability in their families, their marriages, their churches. Generation Z, we've known over the last year or two, is a generation that is becoming more religious than the two older generations. We'll see if that trend continues, but it's very hopeful. That's a yearning for belongingness. And so when I say stability, I don't even mean it emotionally, although unfortunately that would be something that our country needs to improve on as well. But it's a stability that comes from healthy institutions, from healthy communities. And if you get those two things, better security, better stability, and dare I say, I think the Trump-Vance administration is doing a great job already on improving those, then we're going to have the thing that is most correlated to the American dream per se, and that's opportunity. And yes, I want economic opportunity for my kids. But the opportunity I really want them more than anything financial is that they wake up in the United States every single day the rest of their lives and they say, anything is possible for me here. And that means we've got some policy cleanup to do. We need to deport every illegal alien who's on American soil. Will some of them be welcome back? Sure, legally. But the American dream is for Americans. And we need to make sure that we understand that one of the reasons that we have so many of these policy problems, including the housing affordability crisis, is because we've gotten immigration messed up for 45 years. And it is inhumane, not just to illegal aliens, but it's inhumane to Americans. I think we focus on those three things, then we're going to live in a golden era, not just for 10 years or 25 years, but for the rest of the century.
All right, Dr. Roberts, it's not fair that I get to ask you all the questions. We're actually going to start interacting quite a bit with our viewers and our listeners.
But those are going to be smarter questions.
Thanks for that. So if you want to ask Dr. Roberts a question, we will entertain your offers. Just go ahead and put them right there in the comments section down below, and your question might end up in a future episode. You're not going to get anything out of it. No mugs or T-shirts or anything. Certainly no money, for crying out loud. Why are you asking for money? No, but you will get a moment of fame. And let's face it, that's what Andy Warhol promised so many decades ago. All right, Dr. Roberts, here's a question from one of our listeners. Is the American dream the same for immigrants as it is for people born here? Is there a difference?
It can be if two things happen first in this order. Immigrants arrive here legally, and secondly, beyond just the bare minimum of what the law says, they assimilate, truly assimilate. They speak English, which ought to be the only official language of the United States. That doesn't mean that they can't maintain their own customs. In fact, to some extent, that's a good thing, right? Religious customs, their language at home or with some of their friends. But it has to be those two things, legal immigration and assimilation. Why is that? Because every time in American history, Larry, we have had the percentage of non-native born people in this country that we do now. This is a record high, and it's rivaled by a couple of periods in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. We have social and political unrest. History is a guide. It doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And we ought to understand that this noble republic, this noble society, the greatest experiment in pluralism and self-governance in the history of the world, cannot survive as an entity if we don't do those first two things in order. The other thing is it's really harmful for everyone involved. If we have immigrants who don't assimilate, like what we're seeing in London, like what we're seeing in France, you not only endanger the polity itself, the country itself, you're endangering fellow Americans, and that's immoral and unjust. So we ought to stand against it.
So that American dream is for all Americans, whether born here or naturalized. But the key is that American identity and that those American values need to be what all of us hold on to.
That's right. And part of it is self-evident, right? That if you don't do that, how would you have in 50 years or 100 years something you would call the American dream?
Right.
It would be impossible.
Well, because America is not just a place to live and work and make money. We hear this all the time. That's, and of course we're a nation of immigrants. Yes, we hear it all the time. But we're a nation of immigrants because people come here to participate in what America is, not just to see us as some sort of ATM or a place to get money and then send it back to where they came from. If you want to come here, it's about integrating and being a part of who we are as a nation.
That's exactly right. If you look at some examples that violate that, like some of the parts of Minnesota that basically are run by Somalians who hate the United States.
Well, and you hear some elected officials actually saying that sounds like they're more allied with their country of origin.
That's right.
Than
and
our own.
There's a part of Northern Virginia, which you and I know well, in Prince William County, that has been overwhelmed by Central Americans. Some of them probably very good people, a lot of them not good people. They're felons that need to be deported. These are examples of federal and state policy allowing something other than assimilation to occur. And what it does is it endangers the entire project of being a nation of immigrants, because every single time, going back to the point that history is a guide, every single time in American history we have a period of this percentage of non-native born Americans, what do the policymakers do in response across the political spectrum? They tighten, they clamp down on immigration to do what? To provide a greater opportunity for immigrants to assimilate. It's almost a law of physics. And that's what we're at the beginning of. And unfortunately, we have to do that because our policymakers have been so cowardly in addressing the problem.
Well, we've learned quite a bit today, and the good news is the American dream isn't dead. It's just waiting to be renewed. And the next 50 years will be judged by whether conservatives are able to make good on President Trump's promise of a golden age. It's up to us now to get that done. Now, next week, you heard us talk about quite a bit about immigration. And next week, we're going to talk with Dr. Roberts about our border security and answer the burning question, if you don't have borders, are you even a country? That's next on The Kevin Roberts Show. We'll see you then.